Hi, my name is Bob Grenier and welcome to the show tonight. I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project and this is Safe and Sound. So I have some wonderful things I want to share with you tonight. Something that I've wanted to share for a very long time is another slide from Ode. This is one that has been about 4 years to get there, but I believe with that we are pretty much close to a convincing argument now, but I'll leave you to be the judges of that, and I look very much forward to your comments. Anyway, it's going to be a real pleasure to reveal that slide for you today, and it's another one of those times where I thought people in ancient times were pretty bonkers, and I had to learn that they were my betters and that was arrogant and egotistical of me in my earlier years. And therefore, it's been a very humbling process, this learning process. But I've been doing it with you guys, and thank you very much for everything that you've done to help get this process moving forward. Anyway, so the presentation I've got today is called Safe and Sound. And the reason is that with the ultra experiments, these are ultrasonic experiments, and also with the experiment that I was talking about with Max Formichev-Zamolov recently, there are risks with these things. And I've spoken about the emissions from the work of other ultrasonic researchers like Leclerc, where they got exposed to a very large amount of radiation. And I've also talked about the work of Alexander Shishkin, and you can go and look at that under the a new type of penetrating radiation. That's my translation and reading through with other information of his 2018 October Sochi presentation. And you can go and look at the original in Russian if you are a Russian speaker. Anyway, they found that in a rotary cavitation device there was some form of emissions. He believed them to be ion bearing, at least cold neutrino condensates that have this sort of mushroom shape which leaves this sort of birdie pattern in a X-ray film. And there are many other people that have replicated this. One is Perevoschikov, I always get that name wrong, but anyway, him and also Bogdanovich and others. So this is a real concern, and whilst I am reasonably confident that the flux from a basic ultrasonic experiment is in the form of the ultra with the ultrasonic cleaning devices is insufficient to cause any harm, I will continue to look at the potential for that with monitoring radiation. However, I think it's as well to be appraised of the potential risks and why and what may be what's going on. So this is why I think it's very important to have these kind of discussions. Now, it's not going to be boring by any means. As I say, I think during the course of the last week, I was doing a range of experiments, and I was using this ultrasonic cleaner here, which is currently full of water, so you'll have to bear with me as I don't rotate it. But in it, I have this foil, which you may be aware of, on a cake box from a CD, and you can see the kind of damage pattern that it leaves on there. It's kind of like a happy face. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Yay! I hope you're all having a great weekend. So anyway, it's draining water all over my desk, but that's another thing. The thing is that when I have my face over the top of the ultrasonic tank, I'm quite aware of it being very painful to me. Now, we're going to look at some of the frequencies that come out, and some of those are on the threshold of being audible, and I've always been able to hear the very high range of human hearing. So for instance, around 20 kilohertz, I can hear those noises. I find it annoying, those devices that are able to they're used for getting rid of cats and dogs. I find those very, very irritating. It might be a harmonic, of course, but anyway, I also didn't like watching old televisions because there was some squeals that came out of those often. So I've always been sensitive to that thing. However, I felt on my face and in my cranium and around my mouth area a little bit weird, and I am not in this to die. The thing was, the case, the ultrasonic tank normally comes with a lid, and I have to take that off in order to do the high-speed photography. And so then the sound and the cake box is sitting on the top there, and it's literally transmitting sound out, and that's hitting my face. And we're going to talk a bit about that in this presentation today. So first off, let's have a look at what we have here. Now I would like to really give my respects to Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden, born 17 December 1930 and died unfortunately the 3rd of February 2022. And so he had a very good run of it. Let's not he had a good run of it. That's a fair number of years for a man. So well done him. But his work inspired me greatly. I was introduced to his work in 2017, having made some leaps in understanding, at least what I thought was. And we'll look at the presentation where I just discuss how I first came across his work. And then Montagnier, the Nobel laureate, who discovered supposedly the virus that is the cause of HIV/AIDS. Of course, you can get acquired immune deficiency syndrome from other ways, but in this case, it was a virus that led to an acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So he got the Nobel laureate for that, and he was born 18th of August 1932 and died unfortunately the 8th of February 2022. Now I have a presentation that I made following my realizations at the beginning of 2017, and I was kind of put in a position where do I continue with this field, knowing that it has been used for unpleasantness, or do I try and focus on educating so that people are aware that it's a reality and that there are many good things that can be done with it, and so try and get everyone on a level playing field. So that is why I decided to continue this research. But I think later that year, or in 2018, I was very conscious of some things that Tom Bearden had said, my own understanding, and things that Luc Montagnier was researching. So I'm just going to revisit that presentation now. And I did it on Steemit, and the reason I did it on Steemit is because I wanted it to be unable to be changed in the future. And so it's held in the blockchain. It couldn't be edited after the first, I think, week it is. So this is the presentation that I gave at that time. I am sorry for the overlay here. So this is Luc Montagnier, and he's talking about his continuation of work with another French scientist who fell into disrepute for looking at the properties of water and how it may be able to memorize or pass information. And I called this presentation, and you can see it's over 3 years ago here, Disease Induction via Electromagnetic Biological Warfare. And actually the interesting thing is that this particular presentation, this blog, connects both Luc Montagnier and Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden. Am I having audio artifacts? Is that true? Sorry, that's not good when I do that. Why is that? Can you hear me now? Okay. I'll try and not switch between sources too much, and I'll leave a pause. Hopefully it's not too bad. I'm recording it locally, so hopefully that's not so bad. And I will do a second recording. It's good, is it? Okay. Only when your camera is off. Okay, right. Let me just fix that. It might be switching to a different source. Okay, let me just switch that, fix that. When my camera is off, so that would be in that frame. Okay. In this frame now, nope. Okay, so now, okay, maybe there shouldn't be an echo now. Can you confirm there's no echo? Now it's silent because I'm not talking. Is it completely silent? Okay. Turn off the obfuscator. Okay, great. Yes, sorry. I was doing something else. I was trying to mix some audio for another source in for another project, and I obviously didn't disable that. Yes. It's the 5 Ps. Unfortunately, I couldn't go do the 5 Ps. Excellent. Right. Okay, we're back in the room. You can strike that bit from the record, and we should have good audio from here on out. Okay, so Luc Montagnier here. He is discussing in this video, which I encourage you go and watch. He's discussing the fact that he was able to take an electromagnetic recording device, and he was able to record some electromagnetic signal from the AIDS virus in some medium, which presumably would include water, since viruses can't exist they're not alive unless they are in some sort of living medium. And so he was recording this, and then he would send the signal to a colleague in another lab, I think even in another country, but I'm not sure. And they would play that signal into a polymerase chain reaction device. And this is a device where you take a small bit of DNA, and in fact, you probably know something about it from all these PCR tests. So anyway, it takes a little bit of DNA and amplifies that signal. Well, in this case, you've just got the building blocks to make DNA, and he then plays the signal that's recorded from the AIDS virus, and it would appear that it was reassembling the AIDS virus from the electromagnetic signal. And he thought he was discovering something, new. And I actually met some of his colleagues in 2019 at the Global BEM conference in Holland. And they said, yes, this is really happening. And I had a discussion about what I knew about what Tom Bearden said, because Tom Bearden had said the same thing in this book and in his earlier book. So this is Oblivion, and he had an earlier book called Fer-de-Lance, and it was talking about Soviet era research, and they talked about various research along this line. And I've got some quotes in here, but there was also this thing that I found on January the 19th, 2017, after some CIA documents were released, and they were talking about this field form of life, and also the fact that it was related to cold fusion, and that you could use the technology to get to Alpha Centauri back in 12 years with 1 kilogram of iron. I've spoken about this all. And he said, and in this thing it says, V. Kazanchayev's associates have already conducted more than 20,000 experiments at human and individual cell levels, and have come to a sensational conclusion. A special field form of life is present in all living matter. If this field form of life is detected, and if this is done in a laboratory doing classified work, the temptation may arise to exert a special influence on the human mind and abilities. From there, it is but one step to a terrifying psychological weapon. So I think this is from declassified documents from the 1980s, or 1992, I think the document was. And so I make the assertion here that the field form of life is or is connected with chi. And I've described that I believe chi, one candidate could be the cold neutrino, or rather in this case the natural form, the relic neutrino condensate in the cosmos. And so I gave my journey here, and the significance of what I talked about in Red Pill led me to have one lion talk to me about Thomas Bearden. So I'd never experienced Tom Bearden's writings. Anyway, I bought his book, and I think I got it in June 2017. And later that year, after getting some of his books in August 2017, I realized this is all out there and has been for decades, but it is too unbelievable for most to want to entertain. So I thought, because I felt that, and I said very categorically, I thought that they would use scorched earth and leave nothing. They would do anything to stop this technology coming out. I felt it necessary to talk about what I believed could be a risk. And when there isn't any wars, people who have made technologies to be used in warfare might start to think, well, I need to find another market for this. And in peace, that only means good people like you and I'm sure you're all good people, and you don't want these tools being used against you. Anyway, he calls it disease induction via electromagnetic biowarfare, and on page 48 of this book, Oblivion, here, he is saying that the immune system reacts to what it detects, not what is actually occurring. And I have some experience in antibiotics and antiviral factories. It's my start of my career, and so on. And essentially what he's saying is he's doing what Luc Montagnier is doing. He's broadcasting into the body the signals that would come out of a pathogen. And in this case, he says, now on page 50, based on Kazanchayev's experiments, the guy that I was talking about earlier, that connected cold fusion with interstellar travel and the field form of life, the exact structural patterns of the necessary disease induction engines for anthrax can be directly recorded from such electromagnetic emissions of sickened human cells or humans with anthrax. Such ordinary EM carrier emissions do contain those specific anthrax EM disease engines as unfolded Whittaker patterns. Now, it isn't necessary that you understand this. It's not necessary that I understand this. But what he is saying is what is kind of like one step behind what Luc Montagnier was conducting his research. So Luc Montagnier was using the EM from the DNA of the AIDS virus to produce, to record an electromagnetic frequency to stimulate the production of that in a PCR reactor. Now, if you had a situation where, as he's saying, you've infected someone with a particular disease and you record the stress signal that's sent out by the human cells from the experience of having that disease, and then you can play that back over electromagnetic waves, you can get the body to think that it has the disease. And in fact, the disease is mostly your body's response to it. When you get a pathogen, recently there's been some thing going on around the world, and most of the bad part that occurs to you is your body's response to what it thinks it needs to do with the signals it's being fed. Now, what Tom Bearden is saying is that you can fake the signals, so the body does the response and causes the thing that would do those nasty things in your body, but just using pre-recorded signals. So you don't necessarily have to literally have the pathogen in the body. You need to fool the body's immune system to think it has the pathogen. And so he describes a number of different ways you can deploy this. And one is to induce a whole bunch of immune responses in their targets so they get sick from any pathogens in the environment. So, basically, once your body is dealing with some kind of infection, real or otherwise, then it can only produce a certain number of, let's say, antibodies or a certain number of targeted responses. And if another thing comes in, you get ill from whatever else you have in the environment. So it's non-specific, the outcome. And you can induce a specific immune system disease response, such as anthrax, in a target population that may optionally have already had their immune system capability spread by multiple recent immunizations. I literally wrote this over 3 years ago. This was in 2018, I believe, late 2017, 2018. Certainly long before recent events. And this is a case of my remote viewing. I just have to write it down when it's of great significance, and I thought it was appropriate to put it into this particular blogging platform at the time, because I provably have a date at which it was made, and provably I cannot fix it because it's hard coded into the blockchain. And so this is what I believe that they would do. Anyway, of course, you could induce autoimmune responses if manifested like lupus. You could then induce psychosis by proxy, because lupus, which is treated by a drug that's called that has the letters C, Q, and H in it, but not necessarily in that order. If you have severe lupus, it induces psychosis by proxy. Well, it induces psychosis, the condition of lupus, this autoimmune condition, and you can get induction of psychosis by proxy. And I felt it was very important to have this in my blog. And so over and above the direct electromagnetic psychological state induction, Bearden also discusses. So I then give a complete playbook for how this would be achieved using available technology, and you can go and look at that. And Bearden talks about the reality of making whole cities sick with very little EM radiation, fooling mass symptoms of disease and malaise by way of low energy broadcasting of recorded signals on carrier waves. Many people, this is my comment, many people might express different symptoms of different diseases based on their recent immunizations, health, age, and exposure to stress and pathogens. It would be nearly impossible to prove cause for a city that got a lot sicker. Of course, if a person unwittingly had a suitable device on their person, you could target individuals based on their social, racial, religious, or political persuasion. So there we go. So and why I'm talking about this is basically you have two leaders in science there, Luc Montagnier and Tom Bearden, and because they were saying things that were touching on, I believe, on technology that is open for massive abuse, they were not respected by some of their former peers who respected for some of their other work. But Bearden, I fully respect, because Bearden, he spent most of his time warning of the risk of these types of electromagnetic and other types of devices, and how they can affect humanity and their potential for misuse. And with that in mind, I will continue with the presentation. But I think we all need to be aware that things aren't quite as simple as you would be led to believe in terms of what is possible. And here you have two people that are brought together by this sad departure this month. But for me, in this blog, really told the whole story of what was possible if you had people evil enough to carry it out. Okay, so with that, I am going to continue with the presentation. And so this is safety first. For those people that are wanting to do these work with ultrasonics, I have had a physical feeling, and therefore when I'm running the experiments, I tend to stand back from the device and let it run. Fortunately, they're short duration, and I'm pretty confident that the intensity of the emissions will not be too high, because the aluminium foil is not very big, and the runtime is not so long that you get too much coherence, in my view. And we've not detected any very heavy elements. And in the case of Leclerc, they were detecting very, very heavy elements, so forth. So, okay, so moving on. So one of the main things that I learned from Tom Bearden was the concept of phase conjugation. And this is where you have a frequency. In this one case, you can call it electromagnetic frequency. And that can, you broadcast that. So let's say it's a single frequency. You broadcast that, and then you broadcast the phase conjugate of that, which is 180 degrees out of phase. And he says in his book, this one and Fer de Lance, that when you do that, it sums to zero, but at the nodes where you get the maximum amplitude, you get maximum sort of stretching. Basically, I think it's at the antinodes. I've described this before, but you get stretching and compression of the physical vacuum, something along those lines. Anyway, you can achieve the same thing with sound, and you can actually phase conjugate you can have a phase conjugate mirror here for light. Now, I've talked about a retroreflective material in the past when I've been discussing this. And that is, you can have like a polymer, and you have these spheres embedded in the polymer with like 50% of the sphere above the gel layer that holds all the spheres in there. And as the light comes in, whichever angle it comes in from 15 degrees through to 85 degrees, then you get the light being bounced back. And if the light comes in and comes back out instantaneously, you effectively have some sort of a phase conjugation here. And so it's not the emitter that's causing the phase conjugation, it's the reflected light back directly to source. And so you might see this on road signs and on 3M Scotch tape, where you might have biking equipment and they have it on the headbands, or they might have it on gloves or on the back of the heels or on the back of the bike. So you've got this phase conjugation, but you can do the same thing with sound. And on the right here, I've got this Pythagorean tuning here, and this is by Jamie Butt-Earth, and he's talking about phase conjugate of Pythagoras tuning. And so you've got a frequency here, and then you've got the phase conjugate here. And so I think if we call this the antinode, and these are the nodes, or it might be the other way around, I'm no expert. So you've got maximum deflection here, and it's completely still at this point, at the actual point of crossover. So you can imagine if something is very, very excited here, it might want to fall down to here. And we talked about in our recent presentation that this point here, can everyone see my mouse? Is it too small? This point here, this is like the still area where sand settles on cymatic plates. And so this would be a cymatic band, this would be a cymatic band, this would be a cymatic band. Likewise, if you had the equivalence in light terms, if light transports itself through the physical vacuum, and we're saying that the physical vacuum must at least consist of, in part at least, relic neutrinos, then the only matter that's in there would be these relic neutrinos in a vacuum, or in solid matter, or in any matter. And so they would be still and led to condense on these antinodes here, on the phase conjugation using the phase conjugation process. Now, I was going to try and find a video that I'd done previously where there was a sonic horn and a stiff metal plate, and a compound was put in, and it produced a series of antinode. If I've got it wrong, it's node. But anyway, let's call it antinode for now. That's the point of maximum stillness, where I believe that you can get coherence forming here, 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 and so on. Okay, so on that point, you get coherence, and these droplets are there. Now, the author of that video didn't notice that there was actually 2 droplets on nearly every single node. And there was also droplets, if I had the video I could show you, but I don't. There was droplets on the end, on the surface, and on the top on the surface, but they tend to get blown up. But anyway, you can expect them to be down there. So what is that? That's actually phase conjugation. And so what they've done is they've moved the horn so that you've got a λ.5 frequency there. So you end up with the sound emitting coming down, and you get the reflection back at 180 degrees out of phase. So you create phase conjugation by emitting a high intensity sound and it being reflected back at λ.5. So it's like having a string between two fulcrum, 2 pinch points, and if you pluck it, you get a maximum amplitude here, and you've got the 2 ends, they don't move at all. Now, the next harmonic, you would have the full lambda and then a half, and that would also create a couple of antinodes in the middle where they don't move, but either side there's 3 zones that are moving up and down with the maximum amplitude. And so those would be, if you imagine a 3D plate, that would be where your sand would sit on your cymatics, or your patterns would create themselves in water or some ferrofluid, or whatever it is you'll want to represent these sound or wave wave interaction processes. These sort of wave interference patterns. Okay, so essentially what I'm saying is, therefore, something happens that's very special on those nodes. You actually get separation transverse to the antinode. And so what I mean by that is that either side of this antinode you get separation. Now, why would that be? On one side it's pushing over to this side, and then it's pushing over to that side. So anything that gets thrown down here is pushed over to one side at some point, and then it's pushed over to here. And anyway, you're gonna see in the videos that I did this week. If you haven't looked at them already, I'd encourage you to go and look at that. But I'm pulling out some things from that. Now, before I go on to that, I referred to piezoelectric materials. Now, in the bottom of the ultrasonic tank, I have a piezo device. It's a PZT device, and they are typically between 42 to 48 kilohertz, and I will show you the frequency response on those later. But the interesting thing is here that some well-known piezoelectric materials, and we talked about quartz with respect to manipulation of ancient structures, but over here on the right you have 4 different things that are in the body that are extremely piezoelectric. One is tendon, one is bone, one is the dentine and enamel of the teeth, and another one is DNA. DNA. Well, who would have thought about that? Because that means that these guys are really onto something, yeah? Because if DNA can receive an electromagnetic wave and convert that into sound, or they can receive sound and convert it into electromagnetic wave. You have in the body, in every part of the body, you have bone, you have teeth, and you have tendons all through the body. So these are means by which someone could transmit an electromagnetic wave. And potentially there could be some conversion into sound, or vice versa. So is the tingling you feel just the vibration, or is there some sort of electrical movement going on? Well, let's go back to that slide. So we have DNA here. So this ties directly into what Montagnier is saying, that there's some vibrations of the DNA in the water that produces a particular signal. Now, if it was another pathogen like anthrax, the DNA of the DNA of the anthrax virus in the water within the cell that's infected, let's say, or within the plasma of the blood that's infected in the human, you would imagine that would vibrate. And if it is a piezoelectric structure, which it is saying it is a piezoelectric structure, then it would emit an electromagnetic wave. Here you have a 1-for-1. This explains what Montagnier has discovered, and it explains what was claimed by Tom Bearden in Ferdinand and Oblivion. Okay, so moving on, let's see what sound does in when you are looking at one of these ultra experiments. So let's talk about making an 8. Here we have a cluster of nanobubbles. I think it's a cluster of nanobubbles. I'm not entirely sure, but it's like a cloud, okay? And we have in this experiment, we were running the camera at 120 frames per second. So each frame that you see here, which I will run for 1 second here in this demonstration, is 1/120th of a second. And the first frame here that you see, this one here, is just 1/3 of a second after I turned on the ultrasonic cleaner. So in 1/3 of a second, so let's say it was 40 or whatever. Let's say it was, I don't know what's easy, 45. Let's call it 45 kilohertz. It had gone through 15,000 cycles by the 1/3 of a second point. Now, there was damage elsewhere. As you saw when I held this up earlier, there is a lot of damage, okay? and when I typically look at these, doing these experiments, I'm looking at an area that doesn't get too damaged, and therefore this is an area that doesn't get the most intense sound on it. So the damage occurs nearly instantaneously, but by 15,000 cycles, this cloud had formed here in the part of the foil that I was looking at. And then over the next 8 frames, one of these structures is made. So I'm going to play it. Okay, so hopefully it will play. There we go. And I'll just let it loop, and we'll talk over it. So the interesting thing is, the exposure here is 1/4000th of a second. So in that 1/4000th of a second, you can see how much it's grown, and you can see that the initial impact, let's wait for it. It doesn't make the full structure, but it does instantaneously do both sides. And this has massive implications that I may come on to before the end of this presentation. But at this stage, and for quite a long time afterwards, there is no full penetration. It is just something on this side and something on the other side. And bearing in mind, you have the piezo device at the bottom, the water, the aluminium foil, a bit of water above that, water below, and then the hard polycarbonate or polytetro, whatever it is, the PET maybe, I don't know, of the cake box for the CD. And so you have the potential for phase conjugation to go on. The sound's coming out and it's bouncing back. And there are a lot of frequencies, so it may just be a particular frequency that is very good at doing this. What we do know is that, and I'll show you this in later slides, for this particular device, they nearly all produce these figure of eights at a very specific scale. I imagine they will be at different scales for different frequencies, and we've shown that in a range of different technologies. But in this case, for this frequency of sound, it produces these structures. So we've got the sound going up and down, but the structures form transverse. They form, you know, that's going that way and it forms that way. Okay, exactly as we saw when we had those droplets in between the sonic horn and a plate below. You saw a number of zones and you saw 2 spots. And one looked black and one looked white, mostly. So anyway, this is what we are seeing here. And you can almost, and you feel welcome to analyze this. You can see that it builds. It's not quite round here, and then it becomes round. It becomes round. So, and also it doesn't immediately have the flat top to it. And we know now that this is a dimple, and we'll see this later on, and so on. So the reason this looks mostly cloudy is because the phase relationship is such that well, sometimes you're seeing the cloud, but most of the time you're seeing the cloud anyway. Later on, you'll see that you in a series of frames, you see the same thing one after the other. And this is slightly out of phase. Anyway, my point being is that the structure is formed in 67 milliseconds. 67,000th of 1 second. We have this entire figure of 8 formed. And once it's formed, at this point, which I believe is where there is some phase conjugation antinode, if we're calling it right, you get this transverse structure formed with the yin and the yang. Okay. Now, what does it look like when we are looking at it here? You can see this is, I've got a ring light on this, and the ring light creates its own little artifacts. This is at 1,000th of a second exposure. So each frame, so I'm taking 240 frames, but in a frame, I'm only exposing the sensor for 1/1000th of a second. And this is a 10 times slow motion. Okay. So if I step, oh, can I step through this? Can I step through this? It's going to let me step through it. Okay, I can maybe do this. You can see, because we've got some phase relationship between the frames per second and the exposure time, we get to see a better range of what's going on. So we can see, and I love this little question mark you can see here. Can you see the question mark here? And we're going to come to that, that kind of structure. But it's not completely circular, you can see. Now, bearing in mind there is a ring-like, so it would create a ring-like effect on this. And the interesting thing that I find is that it literally doesn't extend out of this zone. Okay, so I'm just going to let that play. And this is, like I say, 10 times slow motion. And using the comma and the dot on YouTube, you can go forward and backwards. Now, I'm going to step back to that. If it's going to let me pause it. No, it's not going to let me pause it. It's going to let me pause it. How am I going to? It kind of, something's going round and it kind of stops here. It goes round, it stops. And is it coming from here and round? I don't know, but let's move on. So in the next slide here, this is a single frame. And it's not long after this was, it's not the one you've just seen form. This is another one at the top of the frame on one of the videos that I shared. And at this point, this is the pit and this is the cone. In this case, I have the ring light. So you see the ring effect around here and the ring effect around here. That's around the lens. And off to one side, I have a strong LED light. And here is the highlight on the bowl of the pit. And this is on the cone. And so you see something on the top of the cone and on the curvature from the flat surface. So this is going down and this is coming up. This is going down. So there is an energy concentration. And we know this because from the tip of this, you see this plume. Now I'm presuming that this is nanobubbles. Now you're going to see later that this, across this entire distance here is, I think it's like 400 microns. So this is 0.4 of a millimeter. Okay. And so the distance across half of these to the center is from the radius of one side of this is 0.1 of a millimeter. And the center zone here is producing very, very small bubbles because it's just, if they are bubbles, they are this plume. And this is only on one frame. I think this was at 1/500th of a second. So all of these bubbles both were generated from the tip here and blew that distance like a spouting volcano in 1/500th of a second. So was there an explosion here of a bubble? I don't know. I think we need to find out. So these frames are taken at 1/500th of a second. And we know from the SEMs, and you're going to see later again, that it's a cone coming up and then it has a rim, and then it goes back into a pit, a little pit in the top. And the other side has a large pit with a cone in the center. Okay? And you can see here, you've got a kind of hexagon structure around the outside. Hexagon structure around the outside. And even though that's a hexagon, this is more like I guess you could call it a teardrop or, anyway, it's the shape you can see. So I'm going to press this play and we might stop on some of the frames here. Now these aren't frames that are one after the other necessarily. Now, the beauty of having 1/500th of a second is you get to see some of the structure of the movement around here. We already know that this spins round in an intense vortex. But I'm going to try and pause this and we're going to look at some, we're going to look at some individual frames. Honest we are, if it'll let me do that. I don't know if you can see this, whether it's coming through on YouTube, but there is some banding here. And it looks like this one's coming around here, going under there, coming around here. Is this a vortical thing on the outside? I don't know. Don't know for sure. again, there seems to be some braiding around here. Is this a vortical structure going around here? In this case, you again have a beam coming out of the top of this cone, but this is going to a bubble. Now, we saw this in other video or sequence of images that I shared a long time ago, last year, I think, or maybe the year before. Was it the year before? Definitely last year. And it appears to be coming out of the center of the bubble. Now, is this a re-entrant jet going to the center of here? Or did a stream of bubbles come out of here and form this bubble here? Or is this a lot of nanobubbles that have clustered, or is it just one explosion producing a bubble and this is just the trail back? I don't know. But when we saw the sequence of events earlier, the bubble moved around the cone and it appeared to fire a beam into the center. So it was almost like it was a re-entrant jet, but it didn't collapse the bubble. The bubble went off. So there's some sort of connection between this and that. And if I step forward, there's another one here. Again, you have this almost like pulsating bubble train pointing to the center of the cone. Now, at this point, when you get this flat area on the top with a dimple in it, there is often a hole through it. So I believe there is a relationship between what's going on this side in the pit and this side in the cone. And there is some flux flow of some type going between these two. And we're going to get onto that in a little while. Again, here's another one. This looks to be a bubble formed here. Is it toroidal? I don't think it is. I think this is a light trick because of the lighting. But anyway, you can see there's this pinching and going down and pointing to the center of this peak. Again, we're back on the... Now, this one's quite interesting because, again, this is the center area where there is a raised bit. And this really does look like it has some vortical nature to it. Again, you only see this when you have a long exposure. This is 1/500th of a second. So this is what I'm calling a long exposure from now on. Okay, and in this one, these ones, you can see this really does look like almost like a strange radiation track if you can see it. It's got a zigzag going on in it. So I think there's some intense vortices going around here. Again, some banding there. Okay, all right. And again, on this one, we have the collapse of the structure. Again, it has some substructure to it. But again, we have a bubble with a beam coming out of the center and going to the top of this cone. Now, is this collapsing into here? Oh, sorry. Go back to that one, sorry. Let's go back to the last one here. Is this collapsing into the hole that may or may not be created in the raised area here? And something is being pumped over to this side and forcing a jet of something. So this is collapsing into here and it's pushing something out over here and it's producing this bubble coming out this way. I think maybe it might be. But maybe over when you're talking about these ones, there's actually something coming out of here and rotating down and going in there. Okay. So I shared this video on YouTube, and it's actually done quite some time ago. Now, the nominal resonant frequency of the piezo device in the bottom of this transducer here, of this ultrasonic tank, is meant to be 48 kilohertz. So I put the line here at 48 kilohertz, and you can see that sometimes it gets to 48 kilohertz. But what I'm doing here is I'm filling it up with water, and the different amount of water here radically changes the resonant frequencies, but also the harmonic frequencies here, okay? And also the number of inter-fundamental sort of harmonics. You've got subharmonics that present themselves much more, like with many dBs of change. Like, look at that. That's up minus 40, and down here it's minus 55. So that's like divide 15 by 3. That's 5 times less energy, dependent on how much water is in the tank here. Okay, you can only see up to 198 or 196 or whatever it is here, because you need double the frequency to be able to produce a transform like this. Okay, and I've got the composite graph here for the different frequencies here, so you can see that at the low end with 100 mil in there, you've got 42.7 kilohertz, and with the light blue here, 500 mil, you are seeing 46.4 kilohertz. So it's able to spread across that huge band, but you can see the harmonics and subharmonics here move even more. So look at this. When you've gone up there, here, I guess this is the third harmonic. I've got probably Alan slapping his forehead and going, he knows nothing about sound. Okay. Anyway, so you can see how far the spread is here. This is from 119 kilohertz all the way up to nearly 140 kilohertz in this one. And I would imagine that there are frequencies that are changing all the way up. I mean, all the way up. And the interesting thing is that these cavitation spots where they have transmutation, we have shown these on the Amasa vibrator plates. And the Amasa vibrator plates, the principal fundamental frequency there was at 169, I believe, around about 169 hertz. But they actually had 2 plates. He has 2 plates, or at least multiple plates above each other. And as they're going up and down like that, yeah, you actually have a reflector, don't you? And so the reflector could cause some phase conjugation. So you could have phase conjugation going on between those plates, accentuating the intensity of the effect. And then once you get a cavitation bubble exploding and maybe sending out a shower of nanobubbles, and those then going and exploding without being able to be perceived, those will send out other frequencies. And we observed high ultrasonic frequencies when we looked at these vibrator plates, which were only vibrating at 169 hertz. So the fundamental is one thing, but it's what it can do up and down the frequency spectrum, and also depending on the thickness, or sorry, the amount of transmission medium, because actually the speed of sound in water and the speed of sound in air is very, very much different. And in fact, on the next slide here, I've got the velocity of sound in water is, say, 1,480 meters per second. So this is a lot faster than it is in air. And so you've almost got a brick wall between the surface of the water here. It itself is a reflector of a sort, and the air. So it's the medium change. Okay, so if we go here, what I'm trying to do here is I'm showing that the velocity of sound in water is, say, this, and while omega, that is wavelength, and I think you're going to love the fact that omega is wavelength. Sorry, not wavelength, frequency, rather. Frequency. You're going to love that is frequency as we move on. While omega is 43 kilohertz, let's say, for the level of filling that I was doing during the experiments, the wavelength equals that divided by that, so it's 3.44 centimeters. And actually, 3.44 centimeters is about the depth you have when you are producing the maximum intensity sound output, as you saw on the YouTube video, which I shared yesterday. Okay, so it would seem that it's able to produce the most intense sound when you have the depth of water around this depth. Now, these are approximate speed for the speed of sound in water, and it's approximate on the frequency here. So as this shifts and this shifts, depending on temperature and this, that, and the other, this will change. Okay, so it's a little bit dynamic. Okay, so but knowing this kind of information, we can do some other thinking about what's going on in the experiment. Okay, so on the left here, if I change the right mouse, on the left here, we've got something from the current experiment. And this is a one frame from the videos. And in this particular frame, we have the ring light, which is producing this pinkish edge, the pinkish edge to the outside of the figure of 8, and the raised section in the middle, and the pit on the top here of the cone. And the side light is producing the sort of a little bit of an understanding of the 3D nature of it. So this is the cone, and you're seeing the light coming from over here, highlighting the raised part of the cone, and the light's again coming from over here, and it's showing the wall of the pit going down to the central prominence. And what do I mean by the central prominence? I mean this thing on the SEM over here on the central image here. And you can see that this has a pentagonal or hexagonal structure like we saw in the water movement videos earlier. And this is actually lit by the electron beam gun over from the left. So it's the opposite lighting to this. So the electron beam gun is showing the wall here, and it's of the inside of the pit. And over here it's showing the side of the cone. Okay. So the interesting thing is this is optical microscope using the Dynalight Edge Plus. And this is showing that the radius here is about 100 micron. And this is consistent with the 100 microns here from the scanning electron microscopy. Okay, so it's 400 microns across if we're measuring from these points. And these are fairly consistent. And this allows us to determine some very important parameters about what's going on in the reactor. So in this same frame that I took from one of those high speed videos where I was taking 4,000th of a second exposure times, we have this beam over here, and it came from some sort of bubble, and then the next frame had this, the bubble was somewhere over here, and the next frame had this beam. And I thought this beam has some substructure to it. And I thought, I wonder if that substructure is related to the ultrasonic frequency. There's some encoding artifacts at the beginning and the end. Okay. Anyway, it says that I'm saying here that I'm assuming that the frequency is 43 kilohertz here. The number of divisions we should have here, if the number of divisions if the sound cycles is 43 kilohertz, sound in 1/4000th of a second exposure. It's 43,000 divided by 4,000 is 10.75 cycles. Okay, so how much have we got? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that a tenth? Is that a 0.750 here? I think it's relatively consistent, given the fact that we probably have certainly got 4,000th of a second, but this is variable. We know from the frequency analysis that this will vary. So this is approximately equivalent to this. So you have a white and a black and a white and a black and a white and a black of this traveling, is it a bunch of nanobubbles traveling that came from a big bubble? Maybe the bubble exploded. This is the traveling reentrant jet. And if this is the case, what's happening as that's going along is that you have this bubble which has sent out this jet of bubbles or whatever. And as it's traveling along, the ultrasonics are causing it to expand and contract and expand and contract. So the nanobubbles that are in that jet of water are manifesting themselves, reflecting the light. Then they are crushing themselves to a point where you can't see the reflection of light. And again, so that is what I believe is going on here. It's going showing the bubbles, not showing the bubbles, showing the bubbles, not showing the bubbles, showing the bubbles, not showing the bubbles, along here for this 10.75 times roughly. Okay, now we know this is because this is on the same frame as this, and we know from the optical microscopy and the scanning electron microscopy that this distance here is 104 microns. So we know the distance on here. This works out at about 140 microns in length, and this is in 1/4000th of a second. So if it's traveling 140 microns in 1/4000th of a second, it travels 560,000 micrometers in 1 second, which means that this thing is traveling in 1 second 0.56 of a meter. And of course, the device isn't actually that wide. It's, I don't know, it's probably 20 centimeters in one aspect and 30 centimeters in the other. So this is able to shoot across the tank in like half a second from one side to the other. And this would explain why in Suhas Ralkar's experiments, we saw these things moving around at extreme velocities, which were unrelated to the actual rest of the fluid dynamics as shown by little particles moving around. So not just the solitons are able to move very, very fast, but when they collapse, they send out these jets, and the jets are working against the water. And, you know, if you think it's hard going through air, it's much, much harder going through water. There's a lot more drag. And so what's going on here is quite significant. Now, I don't know how close this is to the surface, but what if this was very close to the surface and the bubbles are blowing out and then compressing and blowing out and compressing? Do you think that this would make a beam, or would this make a track maybe? Well, before we go and look at that, I want to show you another thing. I've shown this before, and this is the when the sound was turned off on a previous experiment using the Dyno Light Edge microscope. You have what looks like a bubble here, and it's this sort of pointed shape here, but it kind of looks like there's nothing in this point. It kind of looks like it's almost coming down here, round and in. And as it peels off, it seems to be stuck to the hole. It's coming around here and in. It's coming around here and in, and eventually it peels off and it becomes a spherical bubble. Okay? But it does look like it's connected to the other side. And we do know that these form cracks. Anyway, we'll leave that there. Hold that thought. Let's go back to our beam that's going off to the side here. Could this create a track? Well, think about it. And in fact, if you go and step through some of the videos that I've shared this week, you will see that sometimes there, in fact, in the most recent one, in the first segment, when it is actually running at 1/4000th of a second. In some of the other parts of the video, it's auto-changing the frame rate. But in the first part, it's doing 1/4000th of a second. You can see other beams, but they're not necessarily going in a straight line. And in one frame, you've got them coming up, and they bend around in a loop and then down, and they are in like sympathy with each other, but they're separated by a few hundred microns. Okay, so they're all almost like interacting with a transverse wave that's going in the other direction, but at a different frequency. So there's some sort of wave interference there. But you can see there is again around about this 10, 11 number of pulsations, but they are at an angle. It's traveling forward, but the pulsations are at an angle. So have you got a soliton in there that is spinning round or something like this, and then when the pressure drops because it's on the node of the ultrasonic wave, it expands and all the bubbles present themselves. Anyway, what would this do? Well, could it make a track like this? And this was done by Alan Cusk. Alan was the first. I said in September 2019, I said, look, this experiment seems to do the job. Try different metals and see what you find. And so Alan Cusk was the first person to try aluminium foil. And he was the first person to see the two spots as it was then. There was not a lot of definition, but it was an inspiring image and certainly encouraged me to get out my ultrasonic cleaner, and the rest is history. But he also found this, which has the kind of zigzag structure, but these are like at an angle. It almost looks like a repeating strange radiation track. And is this something like what you might get if you had a pulsating series of bubbles running along the surface and exploding and collapsing and exploding and collapsing? Do you think it would make this embossing? Maybe. And this is Alan Goldwater, who has done fantastic work in a wide range of projects for the MFMP. And he has also took the bullet to get a scanning electron microscope. And it was in Alan Goldwater's Magic Sound lab that the happy accident of ultrasonicating to clean a control piece of indium to compare against the piece of indium from the Omar experiments in Japan, that we saw the first 3 nodal positions that centers on this whole journey of the ultra experiment. But in a different series of experiments in indium foil, he found that he also saw a track like this. In fact, there's 2 tracks on here. There's one going this way, and there's another one going this way. And again, it's at an angle. Okay? Is it coming into and out of the surface? So is what you are seeing here the video bubble equivalent of what we're seeing with the so-called strange radiation tracks in the Vega experiments? This is the hydrodynamic model of the magnetohydrodynamic model from Vega. But actually, the reality is these are all, in my view, magnetohydrodynamics. And why do I say that? I believe that when you get the vacuum forming, you get charge separation. This was said by Ken Shoulders. But also, Camillo Urbina sent me, once I'd discussed that, a book reference. And in that, I think it was Camillo, but it might be Peter in Japan. Sorry if I've got it wrong. Please, and I'll fix the credit. A book reference to a book by Preparata, who is a fantastic Italian who was very prominent in the LENR cold fusion field early on. And in fact, the medal that is awarded to some people in the cold fusion field, called the Preparata Medal, is named after him. And I think it was he put the money in escrow or however it is to produce these medals. Anyway, in his book, he talks about in ultrasonics there being charge separation. And if you get charge separation, so for instance, if you get protons and OH minus forming from the violence of the process, you get some charge separation that way. Or you get what Gerald Pollack would say is easy water, which we know is a thing, where you get around some boundary you get this charged water which has a particular structure to it. This is a real thing. In either case, it doesn't matter whether it's either or, and I think Preparata may even refer to easy water. I believe he does, actually, in his work. If you've got charge and it's spinning around extremely fast, as we have demonstrated in ultra experiments, then if you have moving charge, you're going to get a magnetic field. And so I believe that is part of the process that's going on. Okay, so and we know that in the cavitation systems of Leclerc, he also saw strange radiation type tracks, these periodic tracks. So this is in 2 relatively soft materials, but I believe that he saw it also in copper. And he also saw these things being emitted and he captured them elsewhere. Okay, so I believe that we are starting to get a better understanding of what these things look like underwater and how it may be forming these tracks. Now, the next thing I want to look at is actually the reason I chose these images for the title slide and the in memory of Tom Bearden and Luc Montagnier slides. These sort of Schauberger spirals, these spirals we have going on here. And actually, for those that want to know where this comes from, these come from a tapestry that I bought. I call it my love tapestry. It's got, I think, 24 ceremonial newborn garment torso dresses from Rajasthan, and I bought it 20 years ago. So people are wondering where I get these images from. I'm getting it from this big tapestry. Okay, so these are just 2 pieces of embroidery on there, and I've just colorized this one, and you'll see why I decided to colorize it a little bit later. Anyway, the reason I got these is because of this. Now we know that the ultrasonics are producing pulses. And if you look on this 1/4000th of a second frame, you can see this kind of banding. Now, is the banding because it's expanding and it's showing the nanobubbles? Or is the banding because it is actually a structure that's spinning around in a vortex and going down in a vortex in this way? So it's spinning around in this vortex, and it's a vortex of vortex. But also it's coming, it would appear, from the peak up here. It comes around, this is like flat or down in the trough, and this is the area that's raised. Come round up here, and then is this going up here? Is it coming out of here? Or is it doing what it did, where there's some sort of energy concentration that hits this? It produces an explosive force in a very directional way. And note, we did see the copper, what I believe is a copper coherent matter wave, coming out part the way down one of these cones. Was it coming out of this zone? I'd love to know if it was coming out of that zone. Anyway, so we do know that these form a hole, ultimately. But anyway, it's coming down, it's going down here. This shape, to me, would explain why we have this shape. And the fact that it has this sort of tongue that comes out here, does that explain this tongue? I don't know. This is electromagnetic. This, in my view, is hydrodynamic. So this is magnetohydrodynamic. This is hydrodynamic. However, I've just explained that I believe this almost instantaneously becomes magnetohydrodynamic. So this effectively, although it's in water, has a similar thing to this. And if this is spinning around producing a magnetic field and there's a vibration, this also should produce an electromagnetic wave coming out of it. You should be able to see an electromagnetic emission from this spinning of easy water or charge separation structures. There should be an emission from this. Okay? And there's this same structure in the middle. Now, I would say this is where it's ramming the stuff in, and you can get the opposite one where it's hollow. This is on an X-ray. This is exposed to the Lion 3 reactor. This was on the inside of the quartz from the Lion 1. And I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know, there's just too much likeness here with the center spot and the sort of bit around the outside. I'm going to play the various frames that I've got here. That's a kind of an exploding one. So you can see the variation here. Okay, so this one I believe is very clear. Is there a hole here? Is there an incredibly small hole? And there is an ejection of nanobubbles that are then depressurized and then come down here and then go into this center. I don't know. We do know that there's a structure here. Now, this is on a surface. And we've seen these vortex pair structures on surfaces. But it was an experiment by Martin Lammers that I shared on the 2nd of May 2021, where he observed this structure moving around, or rather he sent me the video and I found this in there, where you have this exact same structure with these central focusing points going on free in the water and moving around. So it's like the phase conjugation is occurring, but the actual structure is moving around because the antinode is moving. So this is traveling with the antinode. Is that something that could explain these things? Is this the coherent matter wave traveling? Damage. Is this the coherent matter wave traveling and causing damage? Is this, if I can get to it, the coherent matter wave traveling, causing the illumination there, and these pulsating here? Okay, again, there's a coherent matter wave. Maybe is that coming around? I don't know. But what I do know is that for some reason, these disc-shaped structures are able to form in the free water these overlaid structures with these central focus points. Now, the central focus point is this because it is a lot of nanobubbles at that point, and it is reflecting the light, or is this actually light? It's difficult to tell. Is this light, or is it actually reflection of light? This, I believe, would be reflection of light because it's kind of depressurizing. I don't know. Okay, so with that said, I took the... It's easier to do it this way than to use the frame here, for instance. I took the image I took of the tapestry, and I produced this image. And so what you have here is coming out of the side of the pit in the cone. So this is the cone, and out of the side of the pit you have something coming, whether it's an energy pulse or there's a nanopore and there's a load of nanobubbles coming out and then they are pulsing and coming around, or this is the vortical structure and it comes down here with the left rotation on the vortex, and then it enters the actual raised area in the center of the pit, and it then comes out and goes round the other way underneath. So it comes out of the pit in the top of the cone, goes round and down into the pit and goes into the cone in the top of the pit, and it comes out here. And so what's actually happening here is it disappears. It goes round inside, like one extra loop, and then comes round here. Goes round here, one loop comes round here. Okay? And so what you have here is a left swastika and a right swastika. This is a cross section. This is, in my view, what you are seeing here. And these are bound together by their necessity to have the energy stream from their adjacent one. But they are prevented from coming together by probably some form of electromagnetic force or pressure between them. So they are like two discs. So it's probably the worst example I could use. I have these two magnets and they are coming together and they're kind of like offset like that. Yeah? I can show you that. Gonna work. This is literally the worst thing I could use, these ND52 magnets. So they're like that, right? And they can't come completely together. Okay, so you see here, see what I've got there. There we go, right? So they're offset like that. So one feeds the other, and that keeps them bound together. They're yin-yang, the maker, the breaker, and they're bound together. And of course, this is one of the spheres that Alan Goldwater found, having it been predicted by myself, following work of David Boutlier from finding that the cones that are formed here sometimes are magnetic. Okay. So if this is the case, then this might explain some of the things that were very, very difficult to explain before. Now, I would suggest that this is one magnetic charge because the charges are spinning around one way, and this is another magnetic charge because the charges are spinning around the other way. Okay? So you have a north and a south pole. A north and a south pole. Okay? So what does this mean? Well, here we have these overlaid structures that Solin says is the core feature of a coherent nuclear reaction process. And they are identical to the structures we observed in Lion. One on the inside and the outside, and this is on another, I think it's on another Lion here. Again, it's exactly the same thing, it's just in a different format. I believe it's something like this, having seen what we are seeing coming out of these very high speed photography with even higher speed exposure time. So all of this action is happening in 1/4000th of a second. Okay. And what you see is, again, just like he has here, overlaid on here, this is underlaid on this side and it's overlaid on the outside. So the left one here is this one over here and it's overlaid on the top. And I believe that potentially here you've got something coming out of the center and coming around here and coming in the vortex here. And maybe it will come out of here and somehow it bleeds around here and goes down here. And then it comes through here and it goes round in this way. So it's coming around that way, and then it comes out of the center here and comes round this way. These two are locked together, but because of the electromagnetic nature of them, or some other field, they can't go closer together. They are this structure. They are this structure. Now the other thing is, it's split in three at 120 degrees perfectly. Okay, 120 degrees perfectly. Well, look at this. This is split into three wings. Okay, we've got a bit coming in here, a bit coming in here, a bit coming in here. Okay, and it's split into three. It's not less clear on this one. Okay, so I believe that this is a reasonable attempt at what is going on, and this would create magnetic charges. Now, one wonders if this connection between them breaks, do they fly off spinning? And if so, do they retain themselves as a magnetic charge north and as a magnetic charge south? Well, perhaps they do. Perhaps they do. And so this would explain why you would have north and south charges that may be some distance apart. But if they do connect each other, and I will do a whole separate presentation on this, if they do keep their connection, this would explain a wide range of phenomena in this space. So now the reason I painted this green and this red, this was basically the original color, is because if you remember, we had the green and red bands on the Vega Valley in that floodplain. And I said that they were circularly polarized by an intense magnetic field. And I believe 100% that that is exactly what's going on now. And also around the walls of the Vega Valley, you saw these cones, and they are in pairs. And the distance between the tips of these and the overall structure is exactly the same as the distance between the structures that are polarized green and red under normal light. Okay, if people can't remember that, or maybe I will find it. But anyway, so again, we have the same structure here, and this is a micro area, and one would be going one way and one would be going the other way. Okay, and this is I've drawn in the past what I believe is going on, and so something bleeds out of here maybe, or comes out of here, comes over here. And comes round in a vortex, and then some comes round here and goes round in the opposite direction. Okay, and here it is under the SEM, and you can see the S shape here of the vortical structure. Okay, and notice it's kind of not necessarily, it is a little bit in the center here, but this is off center here. Okay, so you can imagine it was coming out of the side a little bit on this one. This is the pit, and here. This would be the pit, and this would be the cone. But because it's a coin and it can't really be moved much, the pit just gets eaten away, and the material is moved here. And we know that this is transmuting matter on the small structure. So over here we have the small structure. This is the same thing as I showed here. This is the close-up of it. So one is one side and one is the other side. This kind of thing, but in magnetohydrodynamic, in the plasma, self-organizing. And so with that, does anyone have any questions before I go on and reveal one slide from O'Day and how this connects into what we are talking about? Does anyone have any questions? kind of like an infinity symbol. Yes, kind of. It's not quite, though. You'll see in a minute what I think it is. It is kind of Mobius-like as well. Yeah, it's kind of like one feeds the other, and and maybe it is twisting. We know it looks like it's twisting. It looks like that filament is twisting as it's going round, and so maybe it's just one continuous flow backwards and forwards. I know you want the coin, Corky. I haven't tried over the ultra experiment. Yes, I was going to do it this week. In fact, I was going to do the X-ray film, because the X-ray film is waterproof because it's designed to go in people's mouths, and so you could leave it in there all day long. And so I'm going to try the X-ray film actually first. That. Is it true that nickel gets it would appear that the diamagnetic material survives longer, but in the case of what you were looking at here, on the right side, this copper side of the sub structure that I was talking about, there was copper oxide, and the oxygen was eaten on the surface by micro ball lightning. Okay, so we know that the thing that produced this is able to transmute matter, and that's very, very significant finding in my view. This is for me is absolutely conclusive that macro ball lightning can produce more micro ball lightning, and micro ball lightning can persist for a period of time, because this didn't happen instantly. You can't have material eaten along a track in multiple balls with it happening instantly. It has to have happened over a period of time. Okay, more interested if strange radiation is leaving the tank towards your face and not where you are looking into the... Well, I'm going to come to something like that, David, in a little while. We're stumped, Bob. No questions. P.S. All motion is curved in all directions, a spiral. Yes, of course it is. Yes, Bob. There's nothing in the universe that is not spiraling. It comes down to the nature of the fundamental of matter. What if we are seeing it two-dimensionally, but really it's... Well, it is three-dimensional, WP for truth. It is three-dimensional, but overall it's a self-contained structure. That is what the evidence has shown. Because when you see these structures, and when you see them on flat plates, they make two pit marks. So I don't know if you can remember, I haven't got it here right now, the figure of 8 on the palladium coated steel of Hiroshima Masa, where you had a diamond in the outside, and in the spiral arms of the galaxy you had double diamond, which is magnesium, and then outside that you had quad diamond, which is chromium. Those were again this same structure, and because you tend to have them one on top of each other. So they do have a three-dimensional structure, but they are planar. They are a figure of 8 that has some... I mean, it's literally like I got this thing here. Okay? It's just like that. So you have a disc which has a definite dimension, and here, and so on. The actual driving force may have basically 0 dimension, but it entrains material around it as it's working. Yeah, I wish these were weaker magnets right now, because then I could hold it with a little less pain. Okay. Well, 3, if you turn it on its side, is the omega symbol, right? Which is frequency. And 6 and 9 is your yin and yang. What you have in 369 is precisely what you're seeing in these experiments. Precisely. Okay. And this is it. Well, it's not necessarily self. It is resonant. It is resonant. Civilian Space Agency. It is resonant, but it's coherent, and so it's gaining the energy and energy until nothing can get in its way. And so you can see here, this is a reactor, from a Lion reactor, and the Lion reactor never got above 1050 degrees in temperature terms. And here is some quartz from the Lion reactor, so you can see it in my hand here. Okay, so it's about 2 millimeter thick fused quartz, which shouldn't melt at below 1700 degrees C. And yet, an extremely well-defined hexagonal structure, and I believe the hexagonal structure here is caused by the sort of dichotron instabilities of the overall electromagnetic structure thing that's traveling through here. This is transmuting this or doing something to this material extremely inside this zone, but not at all outside of this zone. Extremely, not at all, or very, very little effect. Okay, and this is exactly what you see in these structures. It has a very, very sharp fall off, very, very sharp fall off here. So everything's happening within that area. It's flat and then it falls off very, very quickly. So that is what you're seeing, in my view, when we are looking at these ones. There's a fall off here. There's a fall off here, and then it's very sharp. And this is what I call the event horizon. Okay? It's kind of falling in here, but at this point, it's the material changes very, very significantly. And again, it's very significant. I think you've got something coming out of the core of this one, which is the one above, and it's coming around and it's spinning around into this one, and then it comes out here, and there's a sort of raised bit here. I need to do deeper analysis here, and it looks like it's coming down here and coming down to the top of this. So they're sharing the material. And there you can see the thickness of the fused quartz. And it isn't all the way through. It's perfectly smooth on the outside. So there we have it. Okay. Yeah, the 6 and 9 is, you've got, where's a good example? You have the 9 here, and you have the 6 here. And omega is the frequency. Okay, done. Done. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the O-Day slide here. I've been wanting to share this, oh my God, for like forever, for absolute ever. And again, I have to say that I'm embarrassed that I used to think that people that took this stuff seriously were just a little bit weird. And so, and that wasn't always the way, and I'll explain a little bit. But it's about meditation. And so here's the slide, and it's slide 83 from O-Day. And it's called meditation. And if we take the Lotus position, the Lotus position is very, very specific because it actually has the structure that we are talking about in the legs. Okay, so you have something that goes around one way and sends something up from the center. You have something that goes around the other way and sends something up from the center. Okay, that is what we are looking at, in my view, here. Okay, and the fingers are in a torus. And you have a right rotating and a left rotating, but from the perspective of the viewer, the person, the left hand rotates right and the right hand rotates left. So this is your counter-rotating swastikas, and out of the fingers, which you must have out this way, you emit exotic vacuum objects. And Ken Shoulders told us about this. You emit exotic vacuum objects. Okay, and so these are spinning around in this direction because we know that this can happen through Kirlian photography. Okay, and we know sparks come out, and every spark has an exotic vacuum object in it. But I'm saying, and I believe Ken is the same, and if you look at the work of Keith Fredericks, he was able to create strange radiation tracks by laying his fingers on an X-ray plate and using a magnet, and created most of the type of strange radiation tracks. So this is emitted from the fingers, it comes round in a vortex, and it spins round the body, and you cohere it by chanting Om. You can understand why I felt a little bit bonkers when I came to this realization, right? You literally sit in the lotus position with your fingers like that, whatever it is, like that, emitting your exotic vacuum objects. Let's get the angle right here. Oh dear, like that, something like that. Okay, there. And they're emitting the exotic vacuum objects, and you're using the Om to vibrate through the air to help the coherent process. Okay? So, and as you spin this coherent matter up, the focal point will move, and from the center, and it will move up and up and up through the chakras. And the balance is the cone. That's as much as you can do. So, it might sound bonkers, but I believe you are channeling chi. And you're focusing it through the body. But for me, the interesting thing is that you make with your legs this same shape that I believe, is being generated by these vortices, and the way that they play through the material in this Om shape, in this omega shape. This is omega upside down. Okay. Now, the funny thing was, I don't know why, but when I was a kid, I used to put myself into the lotus position, and I used to run on my knees. I used to jump from bed to bed. I used to do it the whole time. Just a weird thing. I used to do it. And then from being a kid, I grew sensible and started to think that I didn't even know it was the lotus position. I just did it, right? But then I saw that it was related to meditation and so forth. And but I thought that, I can honestly say, I thought it was bonkers. And so I have come through a bit of a journey of realizing that there is something genuine about what these ancient people knew. And I think it is this technology. It is this technology. So what is Om? What is Om? Well, the Om, as a fundamental mantra, this is copied from the site that you can see down the bottom here, verbatim. Om fundamental mantra from stayyoga.it. So, the Om as a fundamental mantra is considered, in fact, the original sound that has created the whole universe, according to the Vedic cosmology. According to the Vedas, in fact, the sound is the basis of all creation, i.e., what is manifested in the cosmos has the nature of a sound. Hence, with a given intensity, frequency, and vibration. And this is also what the most modern scientific theories say about the origin of the universe and on the nature of matter. Everything is due to a wave function that has the characteristics of a vibration or sound. The word, or better mantra, Om, being at the origin of everything, is also called Pransava mantra or primordial mantra. So, focus your eye on the image on the left, the Om symbol. Now, I could have chosen any number, but some are more authentic, some are stylized, just as fonts are. But ideally, I would have gone to the trouble of finding the most ancient texts to find this, but this is just from one site. So anyway, I think it's actually from the same site as this reference is taken. And so I have a bunch of slides here. And so here is our structure that I've inferred from our Rajasthani Arabic Muslim embroidery. This is the multi-layered, twisted carbon nano fluffiness in a couple of layers, spinning around in the OM structure. And I could never understand why it kind of, this bit went under here and this bit came over here and then went into the center of this. And I'm thinking, hold on, this has to mean something. This came out of a reactor that ran for 225 days. This is not coincidence. And I was able to roll this around in Alan Goldwater's Magic Sound Labs SEM using the electron beam gun. As I fired the electron beam gun, this would jump inside the sample, on the sample. This whole structure here, as one unit, it would jump when I fired the electrons at it. And so I was actually able to flip it over. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to flip it back, but anyway, it's annoying. And at the focal points, it had different elements. In this focal point here, it had a sphere of iron and silicon, the same kind of thing that you get out of all of these systems. Okay, this is indium from an Alan Goldwater experiment in ultrasonics, and you can see this one is on top, this torus is on top, and this one is below. And this looks like the wave had traveled through and churned the indium, and it's left this mark here. On the left here, you see the full structure, in my view. And this is the cone on the top here, and the trough with the peak in the top of the trough. Okay? And it has this thing that comes out, and then when you see this on the aluminium foil, it's pinched, and it's not the same as this. This is like a sub-element. And I've aligned this to so this is hydrodynamic, but actually, as I've argued, it's magneto-hydrodynamic. Okay? This is straight up magneto-hydrodynamic. The water here becomes a plasma. The plasma is the plasma in this tungsten damage mark on the tungsten that was treated with the Amasa gas. And again, you see this is on top and this is below. But it just didn't look as simple. But you could just see one going into the other. It just didn't. Something was going on that was more interesting, and I believe that this explains it. But moreover, it has this beam coming down here with this 50% dividing line, and this here looks like it is material that is rolling around in the focal point of some vortex and being stripped and ripped apart. And this is a carbon film, and it's in a circle. But on one side it doesn't have it, and on the other side it does. And this is carbon film on top of the tungsten in a circle. Here is the circle, and it's split down the middle. Okay? And here is this overlaid on this with just some. I've just changed the way it blends in Photoshop. But here is the sphere. Here is the sphere. Here's the dividing line. Here's the two halves of the pinch point, and it feeds in, comes around here. Now, actually, there is this gap here between the highlight, and there's a peak here, and there's a gap here. There's this gap, and where this gap is, you might not be able to see it, but when you get the slides, you can see there's like a strange radiation beam that comes out here. I don't know whether it's relevant to this. Maybe this is a weak point in the overall structure, and it just fires out beams from time to time. I don't know. But I believe that this is caused by the same natural effects that cause this. Is caused by the same natural effects that cause this. And this is the same natural effects. And this, in a way, because it's in a reactor that was there for a very long time, I believe that this is equivalent to what was going on in the Lion reactor. Again, this is a long-run reactor, and this is the same sort of structure, but this is outside of the core. Whereas in the case of Alexander Parkhomov's work, this structure was inside the core. So with that, I was going to talk about Keith Frederick's mirrored traces. I'm going to do that in a different presentation. But I want to go and find a quote in some of the recently published work by Matsumoto, which I read and I just laughed. So if you've got any questions, I would answer them now. Yes, so if I flip back and to and from these two frames, you might be able to see what I'm talking about with the omega here. And in fact, what I'll do is I will overlay the two here. So let me do that. I will just copy this, overlay on the... Okay, so I've done that. Now go play here. Okay, so here we go. So do you see that? This is the pit, it's lower down, it's smaller. This is the cone, it's raised, it's higher. This is bigger at the bottom, right? And then something is sweeping into here. I believe that is exactly what it says in the religious texts. Absolutely, it is the source. It is the maker of everything. When I said this is the God's toolbox, I think you're getting closer to what I actually think O is, what O Day is. Like I say, it's been 4 years and 1 month I've wanted to share this insight, specifically the slide with the in the center of the figure in the Lotus Position, meditating, trying to drive the energy through his chakras or her chakras. And I could never have imagined that the journey in those intervening years would give me the opportunity to see these absolutely, in my view, the same structure. It's the same structure over and over again. Sometimes you see the whole thing. I'll go back to that. These are probably not the red and green. They're not probably close enough together. I just had to work with the embroidery. I think they overlay a little bit more. Okay, but you get the idea. So, and I think in this case, you would have to rotate it 180 degrees to get these structures that are forming on the out of the fluffy nanocarbon. But I believe that what you're seeing here is Om, and what you're seeing here is Om. This is in water, and this is in plasma. This is destroying matter. I believe that this is capturing matter from here because there isn't enough resistance. Water will just fire in here. And as it comes in, it's cohering matter. Okay? There may be some making and breaking going on in here. And we know that, for instance, in this area down here, we get elements that are not... In fact, all over here, there are elements that are not in the tungsten, thoriated tungsten. And again, it's the iron that forms, I believe, in the core here. And I think it's the same thing. This is Om, manifest in physical reality. This is Om, manifest in physical reality. It is, in fact, a kind of like a Mobius strip. And it is, in fact, something like an infinity. But it has this relationship if you were look at it from the side. And so with that, I'm going to take one reference from Matsumoto, and then I'm going to look at a piece of hardware and the implications of that hardware. So I'll leave you with that, and I'm going to... You can have my mugshot, actually. If you've got any questions, then... So what am I looking for? What am I looking for? I'm looking for Matsumoto. If you haven't downloaded his papers, we are about 70% through. I'm going to upload some more soon. And we are remastering it for a print version with some additional papers as well. But the PDF's great because you can do what I'm just about to do, which is to search it. And I'm going to search it for hydrodynamic, I think. Let me see, where are we? Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Okay. All right. I love it when a plan comes together. So I've just typed in hydrodynamic here, and they say this is talking about volcanoes. Another comment for geology is volcanoes. The eruption of volcanoes might be a process caused by electronuclear collapse. The eruption could be assumed as an electronuclear collapse explosion of underground water, which is compressed and itonized by moving magmas. I've not actually read this, or if I've read it, it's a long time ago. This is quite interesting, because this is what's in my view is going on in the Indian, where we see the eruptions, and it literally looks like a volcano in every respect, and it's actually synthesizing silicon and oxygen that comes out as a plume of material. Anyway, the eruption could be assumed as an electronuclear collapse explosion of underground water, which is compressed and itonized by moving magmas. But the author has obtained no evidence for electronuclear collapse yet. Lewis predicted that volcanoes, tornadoes, ball lightning and cold fusion are based on his same principle, the common phenomena of plasmoids. Here it should be emphasized that the plasmoid is a different concept from the itonic cluster. The plasmoid could be formed by electrohydrodynamic mechanisms, but no nuclear reactions were proposed in the plasmoid. On the other hand, the itonic clusters are formed on more microscopic principle of electrons as described in the preceding chapters. Okay, let's have a look, see if we find another one. Okay, there is no other. Hydro. Let's try magneto. Oh, I might have to find this manually. Maybe the search doesn't work as I wanted it to. It's in one of the previous papers. Okay, I'll have to find that at another time. But anyway, I want to give him credit because he said something very similar, which I just came across the other day. But it might be that it's not finding it because the search is not perfect. Okay, I'll look at that another time. I'm going to come to the last point that I wanted to make today. Now, Tom Bearden was very, very keen to talk about the dangers of technology, and what I'm saying about the safety in this experiment is I felt something. I genuinely felt something. And we know low frequency and not massive energy in the form of a maser gas has shown to transmute matter. And it would appear that ultrasonics from the work of Tom Claytor, who's a former Los Alamos National Laboratory scientist, has shown transmutation occurs in ultrasonics when he's working at 1.7 megahertz with the work of working with Roger Stringham, who's shown transmutation in the same type of 20 to 46 kilohertz different devices over 2 decades. He's shown transmutation. Obviously, Leclerc has seen it, and we have seen transmutation and emission of strange radiation and other aspects in the ultrasonic processed fuel of Suhurst Railcar. So we know that it can do transmutation. I believe that it is this hydrodynamic, and which is eventually, almost instantly, a magnetohydrodynamic structure that can form. And I have shown that it can form in just 67 milliseconds. In fact, I believe it forms much, much sooner in other parts of the tank. So from the point at which you turn on the ultrasonics, as soon as you have phase conjugation, I believe that you get these structures forming and they can start to do the work of coherence. And like I say, you have 43, 44, 45,000 energy pulses that are cohering into this single point. And if you go and look at the videos, you can often see the nanobubble right at the center of these structures, and it's blowing out and going down, and it's blowing out and it's going down. But I've shown you a range of frames that show other behaviors. And you have this plume of bubbles here, you have these structures, and we've gone into great detail with those structures and how they cross-correlate to both non-physically contacted and physically contacted structures within reactors and other things that are associated with them. So, and I believe it is a yin-yang. It is this sort of like type of Mobius strip, but has this north-south polarization going on. And these are the magnetic charges. I do believe that they can separate, and you do see some of these things when in the experiment. You'll see them fly out from time to time, and you wonder if that's a load of north or a load of south pseudo monopole structure. If that flies out, then it's going to be is it connected to the one it was born with? I don't know. But will the norths all collect together? I don't know. There's still so many open questions. But when it comes to frequency, we've shown that the different frequency is dependent on the different depth. And this is very important to what I want to talk about now, which is a very extremely serious matter. And so I'm just going to get the source for what I want to talk about now. And this is about, sometimes you can use things for good and sometimes you can use them not for good. But I'd like to think that the people that were instructed to use these devices were not aware of what they could do. Now, if you don't have any wars, as I said earlier, you can have weapons of war developed in times of strife and suspicion, wanting to find a new market. And if that's the case, they're going to undersell the potential dangers and oversell the benefits. That's what marketing does. And Tom Bearden was very clear that these devices that were being developed could eventually be used against innocent people. And effectively what Luc Montagnier was doing was making it very, very clear that the piezoelectric structure of DNA in water could send out particular vibrations that can be picked up, recorded, transmitted, and used to rebuild a pathogen inside a suitable medium. But Tom Bearden is talking about something a little less involved. You don't need the mechanics. You just send the signal into the water of the body of the person that makes the body think it has a condition, so that then it mounts the immune response in response to the fake condition it has, and how that can manifest itself as a wide range of pathologies, because it's doing immune system spreading, and even be lethal. So with that in mind, and recognizing that sound, in my view, is the key to absolutely everything, really. It's all vibration. I once did a video introduction reading from, I think, something that Tesla said when he was overlooking Budapest, and you can go and have a look at that. But what I'm talking about is this LRAD 500X RE. This is supposedly a long-range audio device, and it has a range of 2,000 meters. And what it has in there is a phased array of intensely powerful and focused, very specifically shape-forming the sound. Very, very many piezoelectric devices, and they beam sound. And the idea is that this will be able to provide a focused beam of sound to send messages, and it even has an MP3 player built in, and you can, send messages on a continuous loop, or you can use the microphone here, the hand device, and record a little message that then gets repeated, and then you can point it at various people. So it's rugged, military tested, constructed, low power requirements. It's all weather use. It all sounds wonderful, doesn't it? USB for downloading files to MP3 player. It even has an attachment, so you can put a high definition camera on there, and you can and a 12 million power candle power lightweight searchlight. So you can put a searchlight and a video camera on there, so you can see who you're speaking to. And so the markets served are apparently law enforcement, defense, commercial security, critical infrastructure security, maritime, homeland security, fire rescue and incident management, port and border security, emergency warning, mass communications, wildlife preservation and control. Right, so my ultrasonic cleaner is 35 watts, okay? And it's transmuting matter. And it can start producing yin-yangs in 67 milliseconds. And that's with the bit frame which is not in the peak part of the energy. So in the peak part of the energy, it's essentially within a few frames you are getting those structures formed. And if you look here, the intensity of the sound is normally, when you're speaking, it's at 60 watts. And if you're having voice content, it's going to be in the audio frequency range. Now, we know that we can create these effects with vibration at 169 hertz. And we know that we can create transmutation with 169 hertz vibrators. And we know we can create them with 1.7 megahertz in the work of I just said him earlier. I'm getting tired now. But with a continuous tone, it can produce 265 watts. And what I've shown in the presentation today is that if you are producing a continuous tone at an unpleasant frequency, a piezo device will produce a wide range of frequencies, harmonics and subharmonics. And depending on the thickness of water, you will get intense changes in the harmonics and subharmonic frequencies. And these frequencies have a resonant depth, and they can produce structures which literally tear matter apart. Thick copper sheet, shredding indium, sending out beams that explode and contract and explode and contract at the frequency, okay? Can circularly mash up material. And it's worse than that. Because if this is aimed at a human and the intense coherent energy bounces off their piezoelectric teeth or their piezoelectric bones or their tendons, and there's resonance going on, and the structures between the teeth, the teeth would produce the biggest reflector. So if you had this beam pointing at you, if it's resonant, and it depends on the thickness of your skin here, or the thickness of your bone on your eye socket, or inside your eye socket here, or between your teeth and the gum on the inside here, or the thickness of your skin on your hand, or the thickness of skin on your shin bone, or on your torso, and your tendons. The tendons, the teeth, your DNA will convert the sound into electrical impulses. But DNA can move around, I guess. Tendons, not so much. But bone and enamel doesn't. And so within milliseconds, there will be phase conjugation going on. And at the antinodes, you will get a yin-yang structure. And periodically, they will become unstable and they will shoot out intense beams. These might only be, you know, if it was here, if this is 10 microns wide, these pulses are 10 microns wide, but they're going from no microns to 10 microns to no microns to 10 microns as they are traveling 140 micrometers in 1/4000th of a second. If this can travel in 1 second, 0.56 of a meter, that can go across a kid's head in less than a third of a second. What happened in Canberra is the most diabolical thing I think I've witnessed in my life. A weapon of war was indiscriminately used on thousands and thousands and thousands of innocent people. And like I say, I do not blame the people that were instructed to use it. I do not blame the people that ordered them. I don't even think the manufacturers know this is possible. But I do know that they can buy a $35 ultrasonic cleaner and they can try and they will see these effects. Depending on the skin thickness, it will change the frequency. So for different people, some people might not be affected at all, even if they're sitting next to the other person. But one person, and they only need to face it, it only needs to sweep past them for a few seconds, and it might mash up the inside of their body. Now, if it stays on them long enough, I believe it will produce sufficient coherence to cause maybe beta decay of potassium-40 or carbon-14. Carbon-14 will cause damage to DNA because it's in the sugar molecules that bind your DNA together. The DNA is also piezoelectric. I recorded a separate video and I was so shocked. I couldn't think all of Friday and Saturday. I was traumatized because I have to have I had the only choice but to say about this. I don't think the manufacturers even know that this is a possibility. But these weapons must never be used on the public. They are weapons. When they broadcast the single tone as the deterrent, it might be a tone outside of your audible range, but it's like taking a boot to your face continuously. If a policeman comes up and smacks you in the face, you have them on camera smacking you in the face. But if they, from 500 meters away, it doesn't matter because it's resonant. If it's resonant in your skin, it doesn't matter if it's a couple of milliwatts. It builds and it builds and builds until it shreds you up. I'm so disgusted, so utterly appalled by the implications of this. There is a positive note, however. I want to give them a different market. How about they have a thin layer of water with Fukushima tritium water, and they get all of those LRADs that should be banned and made illegal and focus them down, just like every LRAD that's been sold in the world. You can't use it to pummel people in the face and turn their tendons and their DNA into mush, right? What you should do is get them over to Fukushima, get a thin, stiff metal plate, and get the transmitters pointing down with a respective amount of water, and let's fix the Fukushima water. But don't use them on innocent people. I think if I shared the video that I recorded on Friday, it was worse than the video I did as the introduction to Red Pill, which was deliberately done to make people think I'd lost it. But I really genuinely did lose it, because this is fact. It's fact. It can make and break. And in the case of those victims that suffered all kinds of injuries, it's sick. And they could go to any doctor in the world. I guarantee you, 100% of doctors on planet Earth would say it couldn't be caused by an LRAD. The people using it say, well, it can't be done by an LRAD because the marketing material from the military manufacturers said, this is just a deterrent. Yes, you might lose hearing if it's close. No. 67 milliseconds, I've shown you. You can produce these yin-yangs. These yin-yangs will cohere matter and compress it and mash it, and they will explode, and they will fire out beams that themselves vibrate. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You're the only people in the world that have a chance of understanding how damaging those things are. And they might get cancer. Yeah, they might get cancer. They might get bone cancer. They might get skin cancer. They might get cancer from DNA that was mashed up. So you're the only people in the world that I know have got a chance of understanding this. But the experiments that can be done are very simple. And the opportunity is immense to fix the radiation at Fukushima. Immense. I don't know if anyone's got anything to say to that. I mean, like I say, the presentation was almost enough to stand on its own. I said to Kim, I said, I have a deep responsibility to say this, and I really don't care. I said what I said in 2017, and, you know, I wrote what I knew was coming because of, I can't help these feelings when they come to me, that sometimes I write them down, and I wrote them down in that case. And it involved the 2 people that died this month. And it's all connected. It's all connected. The sound can heal as well. You know, when they're speaking to you from an LRAD, it's not going to cause a problem because the frequencies are varying all the time, okay? And so there's no chance for the phase conjugation. But when they beam a continuous tone, depending on who's got how much flesh on their bones and how much got flesh on their tendons and how many people have got flesh on their teeth, some people will get different injuries. They will be in different places. You won't, you know, you could pass it off as sunburn. No. It will do this. It will do this. 100% certainly it will do this. And when those yin-yangs form, they can cohere matter like you would not believe. And they transmute matter. And if that matter is your DNA, or it's your cells that are spinning around in there getting mashed up, it's not good. It's not. It could even be at a frequency that's actually doing the damage inside a cell. In the water in the cell, or in the water in your blood. It's just horrible. It's just horrible. And by the way, electromagnetic waves will do this as well. Right? If they're the wrong frequency and they happen to be in tune with your DNA, or they're in tune with your bones, or they're in tune with your tendons, or in tune with your teeth, they can hurt you. They can hurt you if it's a continuous frequency. If it's going up and down and it's modulated, you know, it's not able to build up that phase conjugation. There's one proviso, you know, if you've got beams that are crossing, don't cross the beams, because you get phase conjugation. You get the 0 points at the interference. So we are at the verge of having the power to literally make and destroy anything. But with the understanding, with that great power, as Jesus said, the meek shall inherit the earth. And the meek is the wrong translation. I've spoken about this from the Greek and so on. And the meek should be translated as those that know that they have great power but choose not to use it, should inherit the earth. We must respect this. It's how everything was built. It's how everything is built. It's how it's reborn. Electronuclear collapse, electronuclear regeneration. It doesn't matter whether it's water. It becomes magnetohydrodynamic, or plasma, or actual magnetohydrodynamic from the get-go. All of these things will automatically and very, very quickly produce these structures if they're pumped at a frequency. And if the matter is not able to withstand the yin-yangs, it will yield. It will yield. And it will have a fall off, and it's near instantaneous. The eek shall inherit the birth. All right, let's see if we've got any questions. Intent is all corky. Yes, I don't think those policemen or military people that were in Canberra were intending to change the DNA and mash up people's faces, shins, torsos, arms, ligaments, tendons and teeth in their body. I don't think they were intending to do that. But it's our responsibility to try and educate those people so that they do know they are possibly doing that in the future. Because that policeman, that military person, when they point it at their brother's, mother's, lover's son, you know, might think twice about doing it, because they are potentially genetically damaging that person. And sound can do it. Oh, sound can't do genetic damage. Yes, it can. And this is a boot in your face for eternity. It is a boot in your face for eternity. So we've got to put a stop to it. It has to stop now. Now. It has to stop now. Gordon, you've made a good point there. I think pure sounds, they will always phase conjugate, and the harmonics that will be produced will potentially cause problems. Join the technicians. What if we put a little titanium barium O2 paint powder in the sonicator, Bob? Yeah, that could enhance it, but I don't think it's necessary. You just need the phase conjugation, that's it, and you produce the yin-yangs And that's the way the action occurs. That's the way the action occurs. It doesn't matter. It's always that same structure. It doesn't matter what it is. It's Om and it's a yin yang. What I would like to see, and I haven't done the research, but I believe that the exact conical shapes that are produced in these metal foils will be able to be a phase conjugating reflector mirror. But of course you need the range of frequencies that they're going to do it on. It's the beauty of the retroreflective material is whatever light comes in, it gets reflected. So maybe the cone is able to reflect a broad range of sounds, because I think that if we are going to have these weapons, and that's what they are, let's call them what they are weapons of mass mashing of people's bodies without them realizing it, without even hearing the sound. Their internal flesh is being shredded. And what you see on those victims from Canberra is the inflammatory response, the body fixing the body. We need to have some phase conjugate mirrors for the sound. And like, if they say it's not harming them, then we are allowed to come to our peaceful event with a phase conjugate mirror for your ultrasound and beam it right back in your face. Yeah? Because it doesn't hurt you, does it? So you can get it back. All right? You like that? Sick. Sick. What has the world come to? Absolutely madness. Weapons of war used on innocent citizens. Yeah, everyone laughed about the Havana syndrome, saying, oh yeah, it's can't be sound. Sound doesn't do that. Maybe it's the microwave weapons. Yeah, maybe it's those. So there we go. It's been an interesting journey. We're not quite through O-Day, but this was a big one for me today, and it literally, I had the final pieces of the puzzle in my view, and I may be wrong, and I want people to challenge this work. But it's so replicatable, the ultrasonics. It produces this very, very specific structure. It looks extremely similar to the structures you see everywhere else. You know, this is a replication. This is my replication. You know, this is Lion's replication with Solin's replication. Okay. But it's the speed at which this works. Affects DNA, dentine and enamel, bone, and tendons. These are all in your body. Tom Bearden tried to warn the world about the implications of phase conjugation in waves, electromagnetic waves specifically. But sound does the same thing. And Luc Montagnier talked about the electromagnetic signature that comes from pathogens in the same way, or in a slightly different way to Tom Bearden. But it's a piezoelectric thing. So if it vibrates, it will vibrate with its frequency. Okay? So if a disease has a particular frequency, like Tom Bearden talks about, that can be recorded and broadcast to people using electromagnetic waves. And the DNA or the teeth or the bones or the tendons, if it's targeted well, will convert that into a sense for the body that it's got that disease. And the body will fight a disease, whether it has it or it hasn't got it. If they are willing to use the weapon of war of the LRAD on innocent civilians, why would they not use the weapons that are described by Tom Bearden, and that exist? Why would they not? Why would they stop at one? invisible, harmless weapons that they can pretend can't do what they are actually doing. Why would they stop there? Why would they stop there? And they're not even doing it. They're getting the pensioned police and the pensioned compliant military to do it on their behalf. Sick! Sick! Tinfoil hats are normally aluminium, and I'm not sure they would help you. They might just cohere on a different level. It would help on the electromagnetic side of things, yes. So, join the technicians. I have videos of a cluster torus tearing off a chunk of foil if you want it. Join the technicians. Yeah, I mean, I've seen them too, but share it. But I hope if there's any questions, people ask questions on the remoteview.icu blog. If there's anything that needs to be clarified, let's do it. Let's clarify it. But let's make this understanding of what sound weapon can do in honour of both the memory of Tom Bearden and Luc Montagnier. I couldn't do anything. There was no physical way that my insights could help with what I saw coming in terms of disease induction. Real disease and disease induction. I couldn't stop it. Tom Bearden talks about injecting disease precursors, or things that might receive the energy more better, so that you've got it in the body, and then you can induct the disease sense in the body better. If you don't think these weapons exist, they literally used LRADs on innocent people in Canberra. They did it. It's admitted by the government. It's admitted by the police. It's in the Australian news. They did. But the people that used it, they better not know what it can do. They better not know what it can do. And if they don't, they need to know what it can do. Even if Wikipedia or their Nobel laureate likes to tell them, oh, that's not possible. No, that's not possible. The guy's absolutely bonkers. It can't possibly happen. Well, challenge them to do a $35 experiment and tell me these things don't exist. They ask them, do you know that teeth and enamel is piezoelectric? Do you know that bones is piezoelectric? Do you know that tendons are piezoelectric? Do you know that DNA is piezoelectric? Do you know those things? If you don't have a clue what you're talking about. You don't have a clue. And in this case, I will use what I was told in Aarhus as they tried disinformation on me to try and convince me Lena couldn't happen. I would say to them, go and read a textbook. Now, piezoelectricity, just like the microphone in your phone, got one of them? Like the microphone in your phone converts sound into electricity. Okay? Electricity coming out of a piezoelectric thing will cause some charging of things. And if that does, you're going to get different levels of charge. If you combine that one with these yin-yang structures, which will form, they will form, sorry, they're going to form, you will get some nastiness going on. If you're broadcasting a single tone continuously, it doesn't have to be long. I guess one way around it is to have a continuous tone, but it's not a continuous tone, it's a sweep up and down of frequencies. That might be one way around it. I don't know. But like I say, it's like literally milliseconds. It literally, I would imagine probably in 1 millisecond. In 1 millisecond, you're going to have these structures formed. If you're at the point of resonance and everything's in place. And how many of these things blowing up and firing shit, oh, excuse me, it's very rare. Shooting, I was trying to say, obviously. Shooting beams all the way through your flesh. How many of those do you have to have before you've done some real damage to someone's skin? Yeah, Dan, that's the problem, isn't it? If you're sweeping frequencies, you could get everyone, depending on whatever. You're literally doing what I demonstrated here with the water filling on the slide with the frequencies. Where's the slide with the frequencies? Here. You are doing this. You are sweeping up and down the frequencies, producing all kinds of harmonics. And it, like I say, it doesn't have to be there for very long. And here we go. 265 watts with a tone. And that's 265 watts of not a very, very pathetic, very inefficient transducer. These things are incredibly well made. And the sound energy isn't going everywhere. It's incredibly directional. And if it is resonant, it will smash it. Just like Tesla had his earthquake machine, a little device, and it went bing, 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 bing. And it tuned itself to the resonant frequency of the skyscraper. And if it continued to go, the skyscraper would fall over. Itty bitty bit of energy. Now imagine the bing, 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 bing isn't that kind of frequency, but it's like, it's extremely, extremely fast. That's a lot of bing, bing, bings. So it can get the job done very, very quickly. 8 frames of 250th of a second frames it took to create that structure with 43 kilohertz. If it was higher frequency, it would produce a smaller structure, but it would be able to produce it quicker. It would find the bit that it needs to cohere into and it would produce it quicker. You could have something produced in, I don't know, just whatever. If you're using megahertz, it's like stupid quick. The first phase conjugate mirror that I would consider using is a very, very, very stiff piece of metal, which is exactly what I was talking about, and the reason I wanted that video so much in this presentation, where you have the ultrasonic horn and it's pointing down at a large block of iron, and it comes down and they move the horn to the distance of the lambda and a half, whichever lambda and a half, it doesn't matter, and then you get the phase conjugation. That's what I'm proposing, common misconceptions. I'm proposing a noise cancellation shield. So it would be the equivalent of a retroreflective screen, a phase conjugate mirror for light, but for sound. And I suspect the actual shape of the cone with the raised bit in the center, I suspect that exact thing that it produces in these experiments is the structure that may go some way to doing phase conjugation. Yeah, it's a longitudinal standing wave, that's right. So, but you've got to find a way to capture the energy in and throw it back exactly 180 degrees out of phase. And yeah, so that's it. And if we do not, what they're going to do is they think, oh, we had a success here, and they're going to say, look, there was a success in the Canberra protests, and we got away with using it, right? And the idiots in the public, they don't know that it can damage them. So, and it does, it's not killing them, is it? It's not actually killing them on the day. It might give them cancer down the line. Obviously, we can pretend and we can have enough technical opinions that on the news media, everyone's going to believe it can't give you cancer. But it transmutes matter. And a Los Alamos National Laboratory scientist has proven that. He's proven it. Okay? So it can do it. And what is the risk you're willing to take? Now, these things do project almost all of their energy out of the front. They're very, very good at the beam forming. Very, very good at the beam forming. But, maybe you could suggest to some of the operators, yeah, maybe something could happen to you. Even if it won't, even if it's so well designed it beams it out, but just put it out there. You know, you operate this equipment, and maybe it could affect you too. That might be one way to approach it. Okay, so yeah, so Dan Moretti's saying you could make an interference field if you knew the correct frequencies. The way you could do it is to have another one of these devices. You have one. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it's not a weapon that's going to harm you, right? Then, you know, don't point it at me. You can point it at me, but if it's going to harm me, then don't point it at me. And if it's good for you and it doesn't harm me, then I can have one and I can point it at you. So should people turn up to protests with their peaceful LRAD and point it back at people? And what you can do is then you would have a very, very fast transducer that assesses the frequency that's coming in, and it beams back the same frequency, like noise cancellation earphones, 180 degrees out of phase. Yes, it is done. Yeah. But a stiff piece of metal would probably be as effective. You wouldn't hear the sound that's doing all the damage to your body, but if you hid behind a stiff piece of metal, most of it, and behind the stiff piece of metal, I would put some sound diffusing and absorbing material. I don't know, probably something like water or something that is going to diffuse the sound so that you don't have it just as a re-emitter on the backside. Well, if that's the case, John Watson, if they're using very high frequency waves and they're using interference to create the waves at a distance, that's even more worrying, because if they're pumping out the intense tone, that means the energy that could be in them could be far, far, far higher. Far higher. The thing, Dan, about the metal is it will mostly reflect and diffuse the energy, especially if it's high frequency energy. It's going to, depending on the smoothness of the surface, it's going to have little pits on it, and the sound's going to come in and bounce off at different angles. So there's that. The problem is that you only need the phase conjugation. The reality is the evidence of what happened to the people on the ground proves my point. And with what I've shown you today, in the case of when you are putting water into a tank here, you cannot guarantee the outcome. It doesn't actually matter what frequency your fundamental is, if it's super high or super low. Just like the 165 hertz from a Mars of vibrators, we were getting way, way high ultrasonics being produced. And because it's resonant, it doesn't have to be at minus 3 dB. It could be at minus 88 dB or something ridiculous. But because it's resonant and it phase conjugates, it's going to build the energy in those little yin-yangs. Those little yin-yangs. And so you don't know where the damage will occur, and it will affect people differently. It will affect them differently. You know, so older people tend to have tighter skin, maybe, or less flexible things. Different people will be affected differently. So when I thought about this, I thought, well, I've got to go out, and I thought, well, you know, there's only one group on planet Earth that really can get this sufficiently quick enough, and then somehow some of you might have the ability to educate those people that are so-called in the how do they put it in that sales brochure? These are all the people they want to sell it to. We want to sell it to, top of the list here, we want to sell it to law enforcement. Yes, law, thou shalt not protest in peace.
Thou shalt be mashed. There shall be an invisible boot in their face for eternity. Defense. Now, let's face it. If someone's coming at you with a gun and you're in a battlefield, you know, maybe it's useful to not kill them, but to make them feel uncomfortable. Yes. But unfortunately, we're running out of wars, right? And this company wants to sell its business. Commercial security. Yeah, well, I'm not very happy if I, went to a bank and it had some of these in the environment. Critical infrastructure security. Yeah, again, the reason you would have it here is similar, I guess, to defense. Like, if it's maybe a nuclear reactor, you could maybe prevent people from coming without actually killing them on the spot. Maritime, maybe you wouldn't want a hijacking. Homeland security. Disgusting phrase. This homeland security phrase looks very much like the law enforcement phrase. Fire rescue and incident management. Yes, this is okay if it isn't using these ultrasonic frequencies. If it is literally all beam-formed sound in low frequencies, then that's okay. But if it is high frequencies, I would still caution against it until responsible research has been done. Port and border security, you can understand that. Emergency warning, maybe. Mass communication, I just wouldn't do it with that, really. But this is what I'm worried about, and this is what I'm worried about, and this is what we saw being used on, I think it was February the 12th. And within 2 days, almost on the day, some people had really bad problems. But within 2 days, people had faces that looked like they'd been kicked in the face with a baseball bat, or hit in the face with a baseball bat hundreds of times, and all over the body. Yeah. I mean, even a stiff glass shield would probably do it, but then it's going to get the rest of your body. But, I know all of you have got very pretty faces, so you wouldn't want them to be hurt. Okay, so that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry it was a late start. But this was Safe and Sound. When does good become bad vibes? 20th of February 2022. And we have our wonderfully crafted Schauberger type spiral. Not quite, but you know what I mean. And this was in memory of Tom Bearden, who tried to warn the world about disease induction through electromagnetic waves and through the phase conjugation problems and things that can be done with phase conjugation and energy beaming. And Luc Montagnier, who warned that the recent events were likely to be of man-made, according to exactly what he saw in the genetic code. And this comports with my remote viewing from a year or two before the event occurred. And he also showed what Tom Bearden had talked about the ability to create the signature of a disease in a person, but he did it in a roundabout way by using the piezoelectric nature of the DNA of the HIV virus, of which he was an expert, and the electromagnetic waves that were emitted from that, recorded them and played them back into a PCR reactor, and it re-synthesized large chunks of the HIV virus, which the body might detect in the way that Tom Bearden described. So between them two, it's a very consistent story. And we talked about phase conjugation both in light and sound. And I encourage people to find the video of suspended droplets in pairs. And we talked about the piezoelectric materials. We talked about the principal rock one when it comes to rock manipulation before, but I wanted to talk about this for some time, and I never thought they would use these weapons, to be honest. We showed that they can form in 67 milliseconds when you are working at 40,000 3 to 46 kilohertz, and this starts cohering the forces, and then they produce very, very particular structures which have intense beams of energy coming out, and that they're very ordered, and you see this hexagonal structure here, and we see that later on. It depends on frequency, obviously, and omega is one part of the sound, and that is for frequency, and I don't think that's any coincidence. And I believe your 369 is your frequency, leads to your yin yangs, which are your 6 and your 9. As Tesla said, here is our 9, and this is our 6. Yeah, so it can perform these beams. The beams could potentially coherent matter that are traveling, and they are interacting with surfaces, producing tracks, which many authors have witnessed. And that the structure itself, in the magnetohydrodynamic structure born out of water and sound, produces extremely similar structures produced in other reactors. And that these structures as a pair can be self-supporting, and that they are like two sort of disk magnets, but offset, with the intense thing going on in the middle, and these trefoil type structure on the outside. And in fact, when these cones are ripped off, I've shown in other videos that you actually have the metal is shaped in a trefoil with 3 wings. And so I took the fact that it has this shape and seems to be coming down, but not quite going into the center. It seems to like disappear into the center. I believe that you have, this is coming down from the top of the cone, partially on the outside, and comes down and goes into the pit, but in the cone in the middle of the pit. And then that feeds back, and this produces the left-right polarization, which leads to the north and south magnetic pseudo-monopoles. And this leads to interaction with material when they form in the electromagnetic sense, and polarizes that when light interacts with it, it polarizes the light, as we've seen on the Vega Valley. And when these are interacting with material, as Solin put it in 1992 patent, it is the signature of a quantum coherent nuclear reactor. And we've seen it in lion experiments, and it's burrowing through, and again you've got your 120 degrees trefoil going on here, and it would appear from the center of the one that's in front, you have something coming down, and it comes round here and spins in, and it looks like something is going here. It's not quite so clear, you have to look at it yourself, and goes round there. So this is your 6 and 9, whatever it's, which way you look at it. And we've shown that on a substructure of a larger structure like this one, that in this area here on one side, there is subquanta that persist, and they are, in my view, microball lightning, and they transmute matter, and that we see the muting of matter in these same structures under the microscope, and they kind of look like this. In my view, but more like this, because now we can see them with a 1/4000th of a second freeze frame, and there's a selection of them here, and that's one exploding. You wouldn't want that coming at you in your body. And that this, for me, this structure here completes my remote viewed Ode slide 83, where the Om is the base frequency on which you cohere the clusters of cold neutrinos that come, relic neutrinos that come out your body in the form of exotic vacuum objects, and that they will form a vortex around the body, and that the shape of the Lotus position itself is the shape of this structure, effectively, with the tips coming up through the middle, as best as you can do it. And it is an energy structure, and as you are getting better at it, you will create a vortex, and it will, the more intense it is, it pushes this further and further out until you get goes through your chakras. And so this was my first talking about the Ode slide 83. And so I just stripped this from this website here down the bottom. You can look at that at your own time. And it says that the Om is the fundamental mantra and is considered, in fact, the original sound that has created the whole universe. It is that the sound is the basis of all creation. Om, being at the origin of everything, is also called the Pranava mantra, or the primordial mantra. And that this shape here is the shape that we see on these structures. And so you have the one below is smaller, the one above is bigger, and the one where it feeds material in from the ether into the cohering structures, the chi, the Holy Spirit, whatever you might like to call it, is the same here. But if there's something here, it can also rip that part apart, and it tends to rip it apart into carbon. And so you see a circle here, and these two are overlaid, and this point of where the vortex changes its spin here, you see this ball forming, and it would appear to be ripping that apart. And in here you get elements synthesized in these focal points and in other parts of the structure. So various different systems: ultrasonic, a Mars gas plasma on tungsten with thorium, and this is in the 225G reactor of Alexander Parkhomov. And so this part of the Om, in my view, is spirit. I'm not quite sure what this bit is. There is a sort of signature up there. I don't know. I think that's, I don't know. Maybe someone who knows the symbol more can tell me what that is. But I think the main part of the symbol is these 3 units here. And then I will find the link to Matsumoto, and then I want to talk about in the next presentation the implications for this and some observations of mirrored traces by Keith Fredericks. I'm not going to talk about that today. I would have done if I had more time to do the preparation. And also I'm going to talk about how, and I'm going to leave you with a little tidbit and ask you to think where I'm going with this, but how would what you've learned today enable ball lightning to pass through glass? Going to leave you with that. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for your time. It's been very good to get this off my chest. And I just feel sorry for those people that have had to suffer that weapon in Australia. I won't publish the video of my absolute horror captured on film. Maybe I will do at some point if people are morbid enough. But I was very angry and resigned to the fact that I would have to describe why the people that are tasked with using these weapons should know that it has the risk that it clearly should have if people bothered to do the research. If you don't look, you don't find, right? But they need to know. And these are their fellow countrymen. These are other humans, and you should not be using a weapon like this. Especially if you don't know what it can do. You shouldn't be doing it. And you people who have had the fortune or misfortune to listen to this stream, you are the people that have a chance to educate those people. It's going to be a tough job because it's going to be all sorts of people. As I said earlier, all sorts of people saying this is not going to be possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. It happens all of the time. It doesn't matter what system you're looking at. It happens. It happens. Every system you look at. So yes, those that know that they have great power but choose not to use it will inherit the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. So thank you very, very much. I will see you in the next video, and have a great week. I hope to do something next week, which I should have done a long time ago, but I need to do it now. So I'm kind of glad that's out of the way. So thank you very much. I will see you in the next video.